Welcome to the 42nd episode of Renegade Marketers Live, a show that promises to be long on marketing insights and short on overhyped buzzwords. We'll be drinking in the latest tactics and the coolest gin. Yep, this may be the only live marketing show that also features a gin tasting. This show is being live streamed via our friends at Restream, and if you want to drink along at home, today in the spirit that no marketing approach should be an island, we're tasting two gins from island nations, Etsu from Japan, and a longtime show favorite, Drumshambo Gunpowder from Ireland. I'm your host, Drew Neiser, from my home studio in New York City. If you work for a startup in Silicon Valley, there is a very good chance your investors or founders admire, if not worship, at the altar of product-led growth. Put simply, the idea of product-led growth, or PLG, we promise not buzzwords, but it's easier to say, is that user acquisition, expansion, conversion, and retention are all driven primarily by the product itself. Famous examples include Slack, Dropbox, and SurveyMonkey. And as you're thinking about this, think about how you discovered Slack or Dropbox or SurveyMonkey. Chances are somebody invited you who was using it to one of those three. All of these brands seemingly grew organically, adding free users who shared it with others who then became users and shared it, leading to logarithmic growth. Many PLG companies have a sizable base of free users, a percentage of whom become paid users when wanting to unlock more usage options from the product itself. In fact, that's exactly how Renegade and CMO Huddles became paid users of all three of these brands. But like everything else in marketing, PLG is easier discussed than implemented, which is why we have two amazing CMOs to walk us through PLG today. Now, one other note, even if there is no way your brand can take the classic PLG approach offering a free trial, you still will want to pay attention to this discussion. Why? Because today's enterprise customer is in self-service mode all day, buying personal products and services online without ever talking to a salesperson. I might say they happily not ever talking to a salesperson. So to the extent that you can create a self-guided buying experience, regardless of what you're selling, the happier most of your potential customers will be. And with that, let's bring on Michael Callahan, CMO of Acronis, a cybersecurity company. Hey, Michael, how are you?
Hello, Drew. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm great. And so where are you?
I'm in my home office, as you can probably tell. Maybe you can see, well, this side. It looks like a really nice pool. It does not look like that in person. It looks like a swamp in person. I don't know, but this visual looks awesome.
There you go. With your Acronis banner carefully placed right behind you.
Oh, yeah.
Always marketing. There you are. ABM, always be marketing. Okay. So now I looked at your LinkedIn profile and noticed that you went from engineering at Ohio State to getting an MBA at Darla Moore School in South Carolina. Can you connect those dots for us?
Yeah. So I would like to say that it was all completely intentional, and part of it was, but not all of it. I always, when I was younger, math and science kind of easy, always interested in fixing things, building things. And so the engineering piece kind of came naturally to me. But what I did see as I was getting into the early part of my undergrad career, that people that were successful in business had this nice combination of both the technology in business. And so I had set one of the potential paths on getting the engineering degree and then following it up a few years later with a business degree. And, things worked. And I ended up doing that.
And how'd you like going to school in South Carolina?
It was hot, right? Compared to Ohio. South Carolina's a little hotter. But I enjoyed it. And the ability to take that, like I had the couple years of work between undergrad and graduate school where I was in sales, hugely helpful to have that background and like how hard it is to sell. I mean, it's like every day you're getting up and having to prove it. But using that background in some of the discussions you have with classmates or case studies, whatever, was incredibly valuable.
So before we sort of get into the show, was there a worse job that you ever had?
So I'll give you an example. So this is so the job that I had when I was selling, we were selling floors. And I would say, like all of my jobs, I've tried to make the best of it, right? So there wasn't anything that was terrible. I mean, when I was in high school, I worked in the produce department, and so that wasn't awesome, but it wasn't terrible. But I will give you an example that I was installing we position it as a high performance floor, right? It was just a floor, but of course, you're marketing it, so you're selling it as a high performance floor, and it was in a soy sauce factory. Okay, and it was on the production floor, and so the way that they make soy sauce is they take it. They dehydrate it, so it's just a powder, and so you kind of have like this soy sauce powder floating around the plant all the time. Well, this one particular area we were working in had a hole in the roof, and it started raining. The water was going to come in, and I needed to protect the floor. It was an epoxy floor, and if the water came in, it would ruin it. So I climb up above this like office that we were protecting. And you have this huge tarp that's full of water, and I get up underneath it, and it's full of soy sauce at this point, right? Because so it's like 20 gallons of soy sauce. So I get up underneath it, and I push it up over the railing, and the person who had contracted me to do the job, really who the customer was walking out of their door at the same time I was putting up. So completely drenched them in soy sauce, and he had a good attitude about it, but that was probably maybe funniest, worst experience sort of at the same time.
Yeah. You'll never have sushi the same way again.
That's right. After you've been doused in 20 gallons of soy sauce.
Oh my God. I think that would be it. And there are people who don't think it's very good for you anyway. So, once you get drenched in it, you say, okay, that's it. All right. Well, so that was probably not a good example of product-led growth, but let's get to that now.
Yeah.
So what was your first exposure to this approach, and sort of when did the light bulb go off that this was smart?
Yeah. So I've been in technology and with security for the last 20 years. And one of the things that I noticed early on was how enamored technology companies get with the product. Right? They just love it, and they want to talk so much and so much about the product, and you end up kind of losing the thread talking so much about the technology. But you have this incredible asset, right, that you want to take advantage of because it is the reason that you exist as this product. And what I saw was if you could get people, if you could stop talking about the product, talk more about the benefits of what it can do for you, or the use that it can be, or the value it can be to you. You'll have better growth or faster growth, but you also want to have people use it. Like that's the goal there, right? If they're using it, they see the product, you're going to see the growth from that. And in particular, there's one trick, and this is a little bit different than like the examples you gave where they're almost more consumery a little bit, where this is in the like enterprise or the B2B side, is if you can get people using it, and then within the product, you build in this idea of what the product can do, you end up seeing growth. So super basic example, right? You've got maybe you've got a directory along the side of the console that has 15 things this might do. Maybe the person bought one of them, but you have them grayed in or maybe enabled for a short period of time, and they're using the product, or they're using that feature or that functionality. It ends up leading to more growth because they're using it, right? So they're in there and they see how the product can benefit them, and you end up with this, product-led growth. And I think that's another kind of flavor of product-led growth, not just like a free trial of, try Dropbox, but this idea of embedding in the product some of the functionalities so people can see it and try it from there.
Right. Interesting. And so is Acronis product led?
I think we are, right? I mean, I think we have within the product, you have the ability to turn on or off features. So in our case, there's about 14 different services, 14 or 15 different services, depending how you define them, that are all in this integrated agent that someone would push out to an end user. And they usually start with one, right? So they have one service. But as they're in there, they see, all right, I'm doing, like, I might be doing ransomware protection since we're in security. And they see, oh, you mean I could do patch management too? I could update by just flipping the switch. It's that simple. And so we are absolutely led like that. And I think it's, like I said, I think it's another perspective on product-led growth, and that we are, because we're selling to businesses, it's in the product. And if you can get them to use the product, the other things in the product that maybe they're not using today, it leads to great growth.
And I would imagine then some of the science here is they're using one product, and through years of experience, whether it's AI, you might know based on their behavior that these other 13 of these 13, this is the next most likely that they would do it and win. So it's like, you don't want to do it day one, but you don't want to wait till day 120. And so part of this is sort of sophisticatedly figuring out how to expose them to the other 13 opportunities.
Yeah, and not overwhelming them, right? Because you can't just throw everything at someone all the time. You want to be able to say, hey, people that use, people that have ransomware protection, they also use URL filtering, right? It's kind of like when you go to, I guess you go to Amazon, right? And it says here's some other things that people typically bundle together. Not only do they buy, the spray to make your tires nice and shiny, but they also buy a mitt to help you wash your car. You might want to package these things together. It's similar to that. And you kind of walk them through here's a typical roadmap or a typical experience that people have.
So from a marketing perspective, you still have to get them, in your case, because the first product is still a paid product. You have to get them to one of those 14 doors, right? You have to get them in the door. So I'm imagining then that part of your strategy is figuring out which is the best door to get them into, because that's the one that leads to the most usage. Or, well, it's interesting because what's the easiest way to get them started, right? Is that, and so that's part of product-led growth, is what's the simplest way to get someone to start using a product? And obviously free is the easiest, but short of that, I'm just curious, how does knowing that the goal is to just get them in one door, get them started, and then we can upsell and cross-sell them until we've really built that, how does that impact your marketing strategy?
Yeah, we use something that I've introduced to the team that I call problem marketing. And the idea behind it is, don't just describe what you're doing and having the person figure out how it means something to them. Narrow in on the problem. And so what we've been able to do is, if I can be really tight on that problem, that gets them in the door, right? If I can, like for example, we know that one of the problems that our customers have is they can't find talent. The security space, you may have seen stats that's like 3.5 million open security jobs. And so the people that are buying our products have a really hard time finding skilled staff. So that's our problem. That's the problem we talk to, and we say, hard time finding staff. We can simplify your training. It's a single agent, simple, unified infrastructure or unified experience. If you know it once, you know it for everything. You don't have to find different skill sets for different parts of the solution. So we get them in with that problem, and I think that's like I would say maybe our secret sauce in that is, if you can connect to a problem they have, then you get them in the door. Then the rest of the stuff, they end up trusting you, and you can do the additional sales or turn on the additional features that they might need.
And so still, they could have a lot of problems, right? They could, and one of them is recruiting right now. How do you decide? I mean, they could have 5 or 10 problems. And one of the problems is there are a zillion cybersecurity products out there. It's a little hard to sort through. How do you sort of think through and get to this? I mean, obviously recruiting is a huge one, but how do you decide which is the priority one that you're going to focus on that's going to lead to product impact?
So, I mean, there's some of it is the reports or the metrics we can run internally, right? So we see where there's more or less interest in something, and so we think, oh, that's probably some place where we should focus. But I would say even more importantly, I do a lot of work with our current customers, right? We have these partner advisory councils, and I will talk to them multiple times a week, either live or through email or through chat or whatever, and validate that these are the problems. In fact, we just went through this exercise last quarter, and from the, I don't know, I would say 50 different problems that we might solve for someone, we narrowed it down to 7. Right. And those 7 are the ones that we continue to reinforce. And so those are the ones that grab the most attention. And they may, they may all have the same problem, but they may have it at different times. But it's, what we just talked about was how do they find talent? How do they grow their margins? How do they make sure they don't have a catastrophic failure? How do they make sure that they are getting a fast backup if they happen to lose data? It was those type of problems that we've narrowed in on. And so we market to those instead of all of them, we narrowed it to a set of 7.
Well, and I really appreciate it. I'm so glad that we got there, because for anyone listening, if you're going to leave the show right now, which I don't want you to do, but if you did, the lesson you would learn is you talk to your customers. I mean, Michael just said he talked to his customers 3 times a week with their advisory board. If you don't have a customer advisory board, I have to ask, why not? I'm going to put another punctuation and say customer marketing is going to become more important in 2023 than it ever has been if the recession that everybody's talking about ends up coming our way. So talk to your customers, narrow it down. Okay, Michael, thank you for that. Let's bring in Allyson Havner, Vice President of Marketing at TrustRadius and star of episode 27 of this show. So, Allyson, when you were on the show last time, we spoke about your dancing experience in Abu Dhabi, which of course sounded like a lot of fun. Let's skip that and get to the worst job you ever had and what you learned from that experience.
Yeah, great question. I think I've been very fortunate that I haven't had a terrible job. But one that I think I learned a lot from was when I was really young, I worked at an ice cream shop and everything was homemade. And so I was the one that kind of did like the mise en place to prep all the extracts for all the different flavors of ice cream that we were making. And I learned a lot because it was like, I had this person who was very meticulous that ran the ice cream shop. He like really was very conscious of the quality, and everything was, done in a very specific way. And I really liked his attention to detail. It taught me about the quality of your work and really putting yourself and being passionate about what you're doing. And so it was just a really good learning experience, and it was fun, right? You're working in this really great ice cream shop, and I worked probably the most out of everybody because I was the youngest. So they're like, great, you have to do all the grunt work. And that was the other thing too that I learned is that, okay, I don't want to be the one that's doing all the grunt work. So how do I, really stay focused and driven? So I think that was one job that was probably one of my earlier jobs that I learned a lot from, that really shaped my thought process and mindset going forward.
I love it. And I imagine, part of the benefits of is that you had to taste the product with regularity. Right. So
yeah, and it was great flavors. Like there was like a beer flavor one time, like lavender and honey. Like it was very creative. So it was really fun, and like the creativity part of it was really cool too.
What could be better than beer ice cream on a hot day? I don't know. Talking about product-led growth. Wow. Okay, beer ice cream. Hadn't thought about that. Next thing you know, we're gonna have a gin ice cream. So let's talk about TrustRadius. Is it a product-led growth company? And if so, what makes it that?
Yeah, so I definitely think TrustRadius is a product-led growth company. We have a freemium offering, so any tech provider can come to TrustRadius. They can list their product on TrustRadius. They can get access to a vendor portal where they can update content like pricing, logo, whatever content they want for their profile, all through the vendor portal. They can generate customer reviews, and they can win awards and accolades based on the sentiment and recency of those awards. So you can totally interact with TrustRadius with never interacting with our sales team, never paying a dime. And I think that's kind of the beauty of it, because like you said in the beginning, buyers are wanting to self-serve, right? Tech buyers want that kind of real hands-on experience with the product, and they want to validate your marketing and sales claims with actual users and their peers. And so a big part of our strategy is like, we want people to be listed on TrustRadius. We want them to generate those customer reviews because we want buyers to get all the information that they need to make the best purchase decision possible for their company. And so we want that freemium kind of like engine running to make that information readily available, because as we see also in our research, buyers don't want to talk to salespeople anymore. They really want to find that information on their own. They don't want to be cold called. For all the marketers that are listening to this and that get a ton of cold calls and emails, it's really, really hard to break through. So I think you have to have a strategy where twofold for us, where we kind of create that marketplace where it's like, we want a freemium offering because we want all that information for buyers, and we want buyers on our site and using that information to make a purchase decision.
So given that there's this free product, that, if you will, that as a company you can go put a listing, and obviously it's free to anybody who comes in to review the reviews, if you will, how does this sort of impact your marketing strategy? And because ultimately the goal of any company is to drive revenue, and sort of, how do you look at marketing? Because in some ways, someone in product development could just say, well, we don't need marketing at all because the marketplace is the marketing. And so what's the talk about marketing in this context?
Yeah, definitely. And so I started at TrustRadius about a year ago. And so in my mind, it was threefold. So I came in and I was like, okay, let's understand what our freemium customer base is right now, and how, like, at that time, there wasn't a lot going on in terms of nurturing them and educating them. So in terms of product-led growth, a big piece of it is like, once you get that freemium base that you have to continually interact with them and nurture them and educate them on driving adoption. I think that's the biggest piece of product-led growth, is like, if people are not adopting your product, they could just be signing up, but they're not using it. That's a recipe for failure. So that was the kind of step one, like, let's create this nurture program. Let's get people interacting with our brand, and let's start driving adoption. The second piece is an acquisition standpoint. So once you have that nurture and education kind of program and content in place, how are you acquiring more of those freemium users? And so that's a big piece of it, where you want to get them in the door. Once they're in the door, then they enter that nurture program, and it becomes cyclical. And then the last piece of this is, I think, reporting, right? So what are the indicators that marketing and product can work on, and sales, right? Because it's a different model than what most people are used to, where you're like, okay, great, marketing has the leads, they qualify them, they send them to the sales team, they move, those sales teams follow up, it starts the sales cycle. And it's very different, because what you're starting to look at is, what are the triggers within the product, and how does that either trigger a marketing motion? How do you look at that in terms of passing that off to your sales team, knowing that they've reached a threshold, or they've done X, Y, and Z with your product, so they should be part of your paid offering. And so that's kind of how I look at it, is it's kind of that nurturing program, it's an acquisition program, and then it's that reporting to then move those people to a paid offering.
So the nurture stream, as we talk about this for a second, one could argue that that's like customer success, that's customer engagement. How is, in your company at least, but where does marketing begin and end in this process in customer, if there is such a thing?
I think so. At TrustRadius, the paid offering, you that's when you get customer success, right? That's when you have a customer success manager. That's the person that really helps you with like all the paid products that you get.
Got it.
post. Yeah. And so marketing's at scale, right? Customer success people are expensive. And
Right.
so when you're thinking about the freemium offering, it's marketing can do it at scale and at a lower cost point.
And so really what we're still, in some sense, even though they're on the site and they're still they're still a prospect because they haven't been paid. And I got to imagine that a large part of this is out of 100 people, 20 of them probably will ever become paid. And so knowing who those people, potential people are, and that's probably really understanding current customers and paid customers and sort of working backwards, right?
Yeah, and I think that's you made a good point around like your customer base and really understanding them, and I think that goes back to the reporting. So what actions were they, and it depends, like I think PLG, like with anything, there's a maturity model, and so there's companies that have these triggers where like, okay, they do a lot of analysis where, okay, when they've done X, Y, and Z, they're ready to move to a paid model, or maybe it's a usage threshold or something along those lines. But I think there's varying degrees of maturity when it comes to what are those triggers or what are those thresholds that someone's ready to move to a paid agreement. And that's why you really need to partner with your sales, product, and marketing to get that done.
And I'm wondering from a time standpoint, I mean, how much usage, or I'm imagining it's in an interaction as well, right? They have to sort of be on the site, they have to use it, they have to appreciate it. And just as you're looking at this thing, is it like they use it for a month and they have engaged? How do you manage this? Because you could have this long closure where they finally move up. And I imagine there are people in sales who want, no, we need something this month. So talk a little bit about shortening the sale, from free to paid.
And I think that's my biggest challenge right now, is because you can drive a lot of value with TrustRadius without ever paying less. And I think where we really, and I think this goes back to what Michael was talking about, is driving value the fastest. And so where you see people interacting with our product, they're either generating a lot of reviews. You can start to see how they're potentially using some of like the content from the reviews or like their award badges that they get, and they start using it into their own content and things like that. So what we try to do is like, we have products that, okay, we'll automate all of that. So you can use all of the content from the reviews in your own marketing channels, in your sales channels, et cetera. You can license that content and it is all dynamic, and you can use it across, like I said, your own marketing and sales channels. And so that's like the piece of like knowing exactly when someone's going to really want that. And I think what we're doing is we're putting that into like our education program, where it's like, hey, you're seeing all this really great content on TrustRadius. Don't just check the box, hey, this content lives just on TrustRadius. This should be used across all of your marketing, because buyers today want that social proof and they want that validation from their peers. But don't just use it on one single site, use it across everywhere, right? That's one area. I think the other thing that we look at too is the traffic. So when we see high volumes of traffic for like a certain category, or maybe a lot of people going to your product page, that all turns into intent signals that we can then monetize. So we're saying like, hey, here are all these logos that are all these new accounts that are looking at your product or looking at your competitors. Wouldn't you want this data so you can either target them in advertising or have your sales team go after them, or whatever for your ABM strategy? So we start to look at we're starting to figure that out, where it's like, okay, what are these key indicators of like a really successful profile on TrustRadius, and then how do we drive value for whoever we're talking to at that company?
Right. And which fits into so many other strategies on their end, whether it's intent signals and into their ABM. So all that makes sense. All right. We're going to come back to you. But first, I'm going to talk a little bit about CMO Huddle. So let's do that. Launched in 2020, CMO Huddles is an exclusive community of over 100 highly effective B2B CMOs who share, care, and dare each other to greatness. Everything about CMO Huddles is designed to be a force multiplier, helping you to make faster, better, and more informed decisions. Where one inspiring hour a month delivers 10 hours of perspiration saved. That's a promise. Now, since no CMO can outwork their job, and if you think you can, you're crazy, CMO Huddles is here to help you outsmart it. So Michael, Allyson, you're both huddlers. Allyson, you've been around a little bit. Michael, you're a little new. Maybe you can share. Allyson, share, what's your experience with CMO Huddles?
It's a really great community to be a part of. As any marketing, especially senior marketing leader knows, it could be a little lonely in the marketing department. And so I think it's a great kind of mind share with a lot of people, and that bring a lot of different perspectives and come from all different industries. But it's really about that mind share for me, and not feeling kind of like you're on an island in your own company, especially with all of us working remote. So it's really nice to get together with other people and share ideas and also hear the same challenges. You've kind of feel sometimes they're like, am I the only person that is experiencing this? And then you hear 10 other CMOs that are feeling the same way, and then you workshop it together. So I think it's about that community environment, that mind share, and not feeling like you're on an island.
And I love that. Thank you for sharing that. It's so funny because we start every huddle. If you've never been to a huddle, we start every huddle most of the time with sort of either what's working and what's not, or does anybody have a pressing problem? And as people share what's not working, it's like what we call marchiatry, because, you have that problem too? Oh my God. So anyway, Michael, anything, what's your observation? I know you're still relatively new to huddles, but.
Yeah, you've really built a great platform and a great community, Drew, with I've looked for it's not like forever, but it seems like for years, trying different things, like different, maybe either websites or different groups, to get that peer-to-peer insight, or those like bouncing ideas off people with, and this may sound strange, but with like in a safe environment, right? Like you, as a CMO, you're not gonna, you may ask questions to your community that you're not going to ask to other people, especially in the business, because it's your job to know everything, right? But it really helps. It helps having that group there. I like the idea of there's a Slack channel that we have, and what I've learned, like most things, is you get out of it what you put into it. And if you're engaged and you're not just asking, but you're also helping, it's great, right? So if you are, there may be no benefit to me, but if someone says, well, what do you think about events? What's the next 12 months look like? And I give my perspective without any expectation that I'm doing it for me. It feels more authentic, right? More genuine. And it's actually a real community. You've done a great job. I'm happy. It's only been a couple months, but I'm very happy to be part of it.
And by the way, we really appreciate you appreciating that insight, which is it is a give to get community. If you get onto our Slack channel and you participate, it comes back. There's a lot of karma's a boomerang. So thank you for that, Michael. Yeah. We happen to have some recorded comments, and we're going to use that time to grab our gin and our chilled glasses, because we are going to have a gin tasting in just a couple minutes. So roll the video.
I love the way that you're able to bring together experts and practitioners to share their experiences and to accelerate learning.
Just by listening, I've tripled my experience.
It's a great way to have these conversations with your peers.
Even if you miss, an actual live session, just the capture you guys do of the notes, the tidbits, the takeaways, just super valuable.
It's such a nice forum to be able to bond with other marketing leaders that are facing the same things that you are.
There's just so much goodness from the learnings and the dialogue and everything else.
So it's really nice to connect to peers that are B2B.
The Slack channel, I think, is amazing. There's just some really helpful ideas and thoughts and things being shared in there as a backstop underneath the huddle actual meetings.
Because of the format of the CMO huddles, there's, maybe 10, 15 people on each of the sub-peer groups, which makes it really easy to build one-on-one relationships.
It's a community that I think I really needed right now, so thank you.
If you're a B2B CMO who can share, care, and dare with the best of them, ping me, Drew Neiser, on LinkedIn, or apply at cmohuddles.com. All right, we're back. We are tasting two gins. there's one, which is Etsu. And the other, this is like the mini bottle.
True,
There it is.
Etsu one. I don't have that size bottle.
I'm sorry. That's what you have the ingredients, which is why it's sort of missing some. I can't say on the air why we do it the way we do it, but Melissa, help us out here.
Hi, everyone. So I know some people aren't going to be tasting the gins this morning as it's like 9 a.m.
Oh, no, we're going
Probably
for it.
a best practice, and some of us are going for it. So these, let's start with the Etsu gin. If you have it, this is a Japanese gin, and its botanicals are sourced from Hokkaido, which is like Japan's northernmost island. It's like got volcanoes all over it, or it like exists because of volcanoes. I don't actually remember. Anyway, all of the botanicals, we have yuzu, green tea leaf, Sancho pepper, cherry blossoms. They all come from this island. And a fun fact about Etsu, it means pleasure. So hopefully this will be a nice taste for you. It's not supposed to be as juniper heavy as your typical gin. What do you guys think?
This is lovely. I haven't had gin probably in 10 years.
All right, so gin is it's my favorite drink. Like if I have a choice, it would be gin. But it's always been like Tanqueray or Sapphire. This is totally different. Like this is a way different level than regular gin. It smells fantastic, and I just took a little bit of a drink. I'm not going to keep drinking like Allyson. No fingers.
You need to get the full flavor. Come on, no judging here.
Right, okay.
I find this is the pepper. It's very peppery. There's a lot going on in the gin. And it's funny. I'm taking such a tiny little taste, but I don't get the cherry blossoms. I wish I did.
I almost want to keep just smell. It smells so good. Like it's like pleasant, right? It's not like alcohol. Sometimes you smell it and you're just like hit in the face with it. It smells great.
Oh, it does. Yeah.
Yeah, actually. So our botanical expert isn't here today, but our botanical fact is about the yuzu plant, which is known for being like one of the nicest smelling of the citrus fruits. It's described as a lemon crossed with a mandarin orange, and it's very sour, but you can use the zest and juice, and it's used in a lot of like Asian cuisine. And is said to inspire optimism and promote a sense of well-being. So maybe that's what you're getting from the gin.
A sense of well-being. Perfect. All right. And
all right. Now we're gonna taste the Drum Shambo, which is one of Renegade Marketers Live's favorite gin. It's made in Ireland, and the founder based the botanicals on his journeys around the world. The star botanical is gunpowder tea, which is where it gets its name. And this is a Chinese tea that looks like gunpowder. It doesn't taste like gunpowder, but you might get like a placebo taste just knowing it's called gunpowder gin. What do you think of the smell of that one? It
definitely smells different. Yeah, it's I really like that Etsu smell. I mean, I just want to keep smelling it, right? But let me go back to this one.
I have to say, I never noticed this before, but I think the cardamom is coming through really. That's pretty profoundly, more so than I think it's because I'm taking such small sips. Normally, I taste the tea flavor, but this time the cardamom is
really good. It's a lot smoother, right? Like it's just drink wise, it's the other one has much more of a bite to it.
It's a great gin. I went to the distillery in Ireland, and they were telling us that one of the botanicals, meadowsweet, is sourced from Ireland. It's the Irish botanical, and meadowsweet was used to like make the first ever aspirin. So they say that you won't have a hangover if you drink Drum Shambo gin.
All righty. So all right. Well, you have to choose as part of the thing. So who thumbs up for Etsu?
Etsu.
One. All right. And thumbs up for gunpowder. All right. Well, it's kind of our reigning champion. It just keeps on going. I think this is sort of, here's the way I'm going to describe it. I think the Etsu is sort of a summer afternoon martini. I think the gunpowder is kind of winter by the fireplace. That may be the way to think about it.
That's a good way to describe it. Yeah.
All right. All right, Melissa, thank you for that. Let's get back to marketing. All right. So from your perspective, what's the sort of the best part about working with a product-led growth strategy versus a normal sort of SaaS world?
I would say maybe it's it's just the tangibility. Like you're there, you're in it, you're using it, you're right in the middle, and you're using that to gain loyalty and have people become more familiar with it. I think that's if you're pushing and focus on the product to lead your growth, it's you're in the middle. You get to show off the product more, I think.
Yeah, I think in that same vein, when you can get people in the door, you don't have to necessarily do so much work to convince them and get that first, that signed contract, to get that first, deal negotiation off the ground. And so I think that in my mind, I'm kind of creating my own top of funnel. Right. It's just like getting them in the door, getting them something easy. And so what you really want to think about is like all those barriers to entry, like make them as low as possible, if not non-existent. And so the more that you can kind of create that your own top of funnel, and then also the way you create that mechanism to create your own steady pipeline. And so I think it's kind of that almost like that autonomy in a sense. That's what I think about from like a marketing perspective.
You guys do a great job. Like I've used TrustRadius at 2 companies now, right? And it was the first one. It was so the one prior to where I'm now. We used it more extensively, but I came in very simple. It was just let's look at reviews, and then you guys did a really good job from that top funnel of like getting us to see it and giving us some incredible statistics. And I remember this, and this was years ago, but it was if you put a review on a reg page, your conversion rate is going to be 60% higher, and that stuck with me forever. And it was a soft sell on your side, right? You didn't have to that wasn't beating me in the head with it. It was more, hey, this is what you can do now that you're in. And then it was like, oh, by the way, it's a platform and you can actually integrate it to sales. It was a great job. It was a really positive experience.
What's so interesting to me about this conversation is we talk a lot about it in huddles, is where the friction is in the buying process and how you can sort of remove the friction. And this is, it's one, if you have a free product, obviously that's one way to remove friction because people can sort of get started, or you have an entry level product that makes it easier for them. And then the marketing challenge changes completely. It's right. Okay, we got you free. And then in theory, particularly with examples of Slack and Dropbox and SurveyMonkey, those products, every time you use SurveyMonkey and you put that survey out, everybody who touches that platform knows that you use SurveyMonkey. And so you have this exponential growth. And so anyway, I want to also put this in the context because I did promise at the top of the show, every marketer needs to be thinking about removing friction from the buying process. I don't care whether you're selling a $100,000 enterprise product or not. Chances are, and the research keeps reinforcing that your customer is going to be looking for the way that they can do this as effortlessly and as on their schedule with the content that they need at whatever moment it is. And that may or may not ever be talking to a salesperson, right? And so what you can learn from this self-guided experience is how can you, whatever you're selling, create a self-guided experience? Because I feel like you need to have it almost no matter what. At some point, a CFO might call you and say, I need to negotiate because we're going to do 1,000 licenses, or a technical person, a CISO might call you, or CISO might call you to say, what's the security protocols here, right? They're going to need more details, or they're going to want to know about integration. But those are the good calls because they're already educated. They're already down the pipeline. So anyway, I think this is an important thing that every marketer needs to understand. But I'm curious from your both standpoint, with every good, there's some bad. What's the downside of PLG?
I think it's if you don't have alignment with your product and your sales team. So a lot of people, like I said earlier, like everything's kind of on a maturity curve. But if your product team isn't really building a product that can lead to growth and have that be automated, it leads to a lot of manual processes and pulling reporting. And it just becomes very, very clunky, very, very quickly. And so I think that's something that is just always a continuous conversation, and that marketing needs to have a seat at the table, is to be thinking about, okay, this is not just how we develop a product. This is how we develop a product to drive growth for the company. And so marketing has to be in that conversation. So I think that's the downside if you're not super aligned with your product team and they're developing and you're not in that conversation and thinking about the use cases from a marketing perspective. And then I think the second thing is with your sales team, because the sales team's always going to go to their instinct is the shortest path to revenue. And so when you're trying to think about, okay, I'm trying to build this freemium customer base, I'm nurturing them, okay, based on these like it's a lot for a salesperson to like kind of wrap their mind around when they're like, I'm just going to go after this person and I'm going to sell to them. And so I think that that's really the downside, is if you don't have both of those people at the table and you guys are discussing this and you're super aligned on how, like, okay, sales, like this is how we're going to do the reporting. This is how you're going to get your leads to follow up on, et cetera. Then it becomes very, very difficult and it just becomes kind of a mess.
Yeah, I'll give you an example
ahead,
too.
Michael.
We worked with our sales team on the it's a trial conversion process. I'll call it that. But we would get people in. We would go to they want to try it. They click on a reg page. They give us their name, and then the next step was give us your credit card. And as you can imagine, we saw almost no completions there, right? Because nobody wants to just give you your credit card immediately. So we worked with the sales team and said, what are the objections that you have, or where's the friction along the way? And so we built that in. So like contrary to typical like B2B reg pages, we went from one step, which was one step and then a credit card, to 7 steps. But we had much higher conversion. In fact, it was like 100 or 200% higher conversions when you got to the credit card piece, because we had worked with the sales team and said, what are the questions they have? So when they bail out in the first scenario, when they were bailing out and then they would talk to you, what was it? And they would say, well, they'd have questions about what are the different licensing types, or what's how much does it cost, or how do I roll it out, whatever it might be. And so we included that in the process, and so it removed the friction, and we had a much higher conversion rate. The other side, though, was like when they were doing a free trial, and this is to your point about the product team, the friction there was, so you got them in, now they're using it, but it's still just a trial, they're not paying. How do you get them to pay? Well, you don't want them to have to like call someone, right, or send an email and wait for a response. Like, you just want it to be there at that moment. So that moment when they go, yeah, this is working for me. So you work with the product teams, and so we have it's a toggle switch. They go, yeah, convert trial, convert from trial, and it just happens, and it's simple. All the payment information is done automatically. But it's kind of that, I think we have these 3 legs of the stool, right? It's the marketing, sales, and product, and we all have to work together. And if you build some of this in partnership, it works well.
And I wonder, this is the sort of ignorant question here, but so because it's called product-led growth, and the product people may think, hey, we're the stars here. What are you even doing in the room? And Allyson, I'm just wondering, is the reason that they don't invite you in is because they have this sort of sense of, we got this, we know we're the ones, and they're not really thinking that marketing has a place in this strategy.
Yeah, they might, and it's a little different at TrustRadius. I think I have, one of the reasons I went to TrustRadius and I love it there so much is because I have such a great relationship with the product team, and the product team is super strong, and I do have that seat at the table. But I do think that deter is, from a product standpoint, like in their head, it's like, of course we should be thinking about growth. Like, why would we build products that don't lead to growth of the company? But I think it's the automation of that, or the self-service of it, where it's, and we've been talking about this a lot, where those barriers to entry So from a marketing perspective, my lowest conversion rate is at the bottom of the funnel, right? As soon as someone needs to put their hand or signature on a piece of paper and pay us, that is where we see the biggest drop off. And so that's where like product might not have that perspective. And so you're coming to the place from a go-to-market perspective. And so you have to bridge that gap between, okay, what are the use cases that we need to provide up front from a freemium offering that then lead into, because like the other thing that could also happen that I've seen is that you have a really good freemium product and you didn't really create those thresholds where people are like, why should I pay you?
Right.
A
free account is just fine. Thank you very much.
Like this is great. Like, and so I think that's the other piece is that you need that feedback from the product standpoint and the customer use cases. Because your product team could be developing and they're like, oh, this is the coolest thing. And they're not thinking about the whole GTM and thinking about, okay, what are those kind of those thresholds that we want to actually start making people pay. And that's just a perspective that you have to bring from the kind of from the like field, from the marketing POV.
I'll add on that is like, I think one of the things I always try to think of, and this is, I'll use the product team as an example here, but it's anyone that you're talking with or trying to persuade or convince or well, just any of your audience. The product people are really proud of what they built, right? And they want it to shine, and it's super hard. In fact, it's like one of the hardest roles in the company, and it's also like the most creative. I know I've had discussions with developers before and said, you are probably more creative than the marketing team because you start with nothing. You start with a blank computer screen, and then all of a sudden, by typing these different things, wow, there's a product that people use. It's incredibly creative. So they're really proud of it. And so what we try to do is not patronize them, but say like, this is going to help show off your product. This is going to help people buy it more if we can work together, if we can build these things, because we have an idea of what motivates people. And that motivation is what's going to get the product adopted, and it builds a real nice partnership and relationship, so that you're both kind of working toward the same goal.
And it feels like that's the real key thing here is that, in other companies where it's very clear what marketing's job is, here you have to negotiate with your product people and with the sales people to find it's a little bit different than in some of the others. But okay, before we continue, of course, we have to ask, because in this is the part of the show where we say, what would Ben Franklin say? I'm not going to get into why we always ask this question, but we do ask this question on this show. And one of the interesting things that we keep coming back to is that the product is the central to the story. It is a demonstration of value. And so I think Franklin might say a good example is the best sermon. Now, you're going to have to work on that a little bit to understand how these things are connected, but a good example is the best sermon. Okay, so let's get back to it, and we only have about 7 minutes. So
Drew, can I talk to that for a second? And I love that idea, because as I thought about it when you said think about this a little bit, it talks about your audience. Right. So you think you imagine someone giving a sermon, or it could be us writing an email, right? That's in some sense, that's kind of cool enough a sermon. A good one is the example. So if you can't connect and your people out in the pews or the congregation, if you don't give an example that's meaningful, it's too hard for them to figure it out. Right. So that's beautiful, right? A good example is the best sermon. I love it.
There you go. All right. Well, thank you for that. So, I'm thinking about this, and again, this naming is everything, and we have this PLG and product-led growth, and I'm thinking of investors, venture capital firms, and they're thinking, we have this PLG company, we're about to put a lot of money into it, and we're going to put most of that capital that we did back into the product because it's product-led growth. So help break the myth that's surrounding PLG that you don't really need marketing because the product essentially markets itself. Maybe that's true, but maybe it's a myth. Can you debunk it, Allyson?
Yeah. So I mean, the essentials of marketing still stand, right? You need to still create a pain point in the market for them to even want the freemium version of that product. So the basic principles of marketing still stand. So you have to still find that macro trend in that market or insert one that's creating a pain point for your ideal customer, right? And you need marketing to do that. And then you need marketing to connect that pain point with your solution. And so you still have to do that entire kind of crafting that story arc and that narrative and put that out into the market to even get people to that freemium stage. Then, what is really great is then once they get to that stage, right, you lower that barrier to entry, they get in, and then you continue that nurturing. But marketing is essential to even get them to that first step of signing up.
Okay. And Michael?
Yeah. So here's a way to, I guess, debunk is the word you used, that the product sells itself. So I was out on AWS the other day. So people that don't, that's Amazon Web Services, right? So that you can buy computing, you can buy storage, you can buy whatever you need. And so I'm out there seeing this is totally zero touch, right? There's no Amazon salesperson talking to me. I'm just going in, and they have right on the homepage, you want to do a free trial. There's paid levels too, but there's a free piece, which then of course you get to a level and then you've got to start paying. So I click on the free one, register, I'm in. It takes me like 3 minutes to do it. I now have access to all these different services. Like I could register a domain and whatever. All of that experience was marketing. It wasn't product, right? The product was the ability to connect like my computer to some server somewhere in the cloud that gives me storage, or some computer that gives me the computing power that I can run an app on. But all of that experience that I had, that was all marketing. And you have to invest in that so that it's when it said free trial and whatever, a marketing person wrote that, right? That's all marketing on that no touch or that product led experience.
And I appreciate that. And I think there are a lot of examples out there. HubSpot might be one of them. You'd say, yeah, it's PLG because they have a free product and so forth. But they spend a ton of money on marketing. And in fact, there may be a case to be said that you actually end up spending more on marketing because you have a lower threshold to get trials. So it's all about driving and getting folks in the door, and then the product might be doing the marketing from there. Okay, so final words of wisdom for marketers. Let's give them 2 do's and a don't for when getting to PLG right. So Michael, I'll let you go first this time.
Sure. One, always think about your audience. Audience. That is the first thing. And what do they care about? The second do is make it as simple as you can. Work with the product teams to make it as simple as you can. And the don't is don't try to take what you've historically done, which is reg page with a bunch of forms that like the traditional way. Don't do that. Go to the new way where the product is what's selling the story.
Cool. Okay, Allyson, 2 do's and a don't.
Yeah, so I think definitely find the value of your product and really drive that home for your customers, because I think when they start, right, you have to find that value proposition that's going to get them to convert. Because at the end of the day, you can have as many freemium users as you want, but if you don't have that value point that gets them to convert to paid, you're kind of in trouble. And then the second thing I would say is kind of what I've been saying a lot is align with your product and your sales team. Have those conversations and have a seat at the table. And the don't is, I would say, don't try to take this on your own. Like from a marketing perspective, you have to have buy-in. So it goes back to my do with the alignment piece, but don't try to push this in your company if you don't have backing from others in the company. It's a very, very, it's a big shift and it's a big mindset shift. So you really have to have a lot of buy-in across your company.
Yeah, it really is. And I see it so clearly now as a result of talking about this. It is about this 3-legged stool, sales, product, marketing, really working together and recognizing the strengths of this particular system. And this falls apart. If you pull marketing out, you don't have enough customers. You probably don't have, you pull sales out, you may not close or figure out. And if you pull product out, well, you don't have product-led growth. So there it is. All right. Well, thank you, Michael and Allyson. You're both great sports and so insightful. Thank you, audience, for staying with us. Please join us in 2 weeks when we'll be talking about customer marketing with Tejal Parekh, Marka Armstrong, and Grant Johnson. Melissa, cue the music. Renegade Marketers Live is produced by Melissa Caffrey. Our intern is Laura Parkin. Our botanical expert is Nicole Hernandez. For show notes, past episodes, and the latest on my new book, Renegade Marketing 12 Steps to Building Unbeatable B2B Brands, please visit renegade.com. I'm your host, Drew Neiser, and until next time, keep those renegade thinking caps on and strong.